And so it is. Welcome to the Dom. I'll be your host, Kyle Coberly. Let's talk about it. So, to start with, I want to get a sense of what we feel confident with, and what we don't feel confident with the Dom. So, to start with, let's just start with what it is. So, I want you to write out a Slack message to me answering the question, what is the Dom? Someone asked me that at a party, job interview, whatever. What's the Dom? What are you going to tell them? I'll give you 2-ish minutes to write out an answer to that. What is the Dom? Go. You're going to Slack me when you're done. So 20 seconds. All right, send me whatever you got. Take a look through these. Very good answer, Haley. Great answer, Bryce. Let's look through the rest of these. Cool, very nice. So we're generally pretty good at a high level. So I want to break this down a little bit further. So HTML, this is just some characters. Doesn't have any like magic powers or anything like that. It's a string. It needs to be formatted a certain way. But at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of characters. Okay, so let's say I had some HTML that looked like that. I'm storing it in a file called hi.html. Cool. So if I ask for this file, my browser asks for this file, what happens is I get all these characters back. I get the contents of the file, and my browser turns it into the DOM. The DOM could be represented by a tree. A couple of you got that. You can think of this more like nodes. So HTML has a head, it has a body, and the body has a p tag, and then the p tag has a node that's the string hi. We call this parsing. We take this string, this bunch of characters, and we parse it into this tree. Ask me some questions about what I just said.
If like, what type is the DOM? If you were to just in the JavaScript console ask it what kind of object it is, it's just a JavaScript object?
Just a JavaScript object. That's it. In fact, if you go to your console and type document, that's the top level of all of this. I think HTML even hangs off of that. So we actually have something that your browser sort of starts with. And when it parses that HTML into the DOM, it all hangs off of the document. What else?
Are CSS and JavaScript considered part of the DOM, or is that outside of the DOM?
Ah, outstanding question. CSS is, JavaScript is not. So CSS gets applied to each of these nodes. So we say, okay, I'm going to target all paragraph tags. And so the browser will look through this tree and it'll note every paragraph tag. And these nodes can have attributes, just like objects have properties in Ruby. These can have attributes. And then we can set style.color equal to red. But your style sheets get applied to these nodes. JavaScript is how we can manipulate this tree. We can add nodes to it. We can take nodes out. We can change stuff that's in there. But it's not part of the DOM. It manipulates the DOM. So we have that parsing step, and this is like the biggest disconnect I see with students trying to understand the DOM. After the HTML gets turned into the DOM, the HTML doesn't exist anymore. Oh. The only purpose it serves is to deliver the instructions on how to make the DOM from the back end. Once it gets turned into the DOM, there is no more HTML. The reason that's confusing is you open up the DevTools, I go over to Google, hey, this looks an awful lot like HTML. This was recreated from the DOM. We actually went the opposite direction. We have a DOM in the page, and we turned it back into what we think the HTML was to help better visualize it. But the only purpose of the HTML is its instructions for the browser on how to make the DOM. The DOM is what gets rendered on the page. The DOM is what gets the styles applied to it. That's the DOM.
Does the browser ever render the HTML incorrectly?
Yeah, all the time.
All the time?
It's usually trying to help you. So for example, if I leave off this closing P, that's not valid HTML. Your browser is still gonna try to like do you a solid and put the closing tag where it thinks it's supposed to go. It may be right or it may not. But yeah, if you write invalid HTML, browser tries to help you out as best it can, which is why if you look at, well, shit, let's give it a shot. All right, nothing in this file, nothing in this folder. I make an index.html page. I give it doc type. Needs a head, needs a body. Head has to have a title. And a meta char set. All right, so here's my example. If I serve this up and inspect it, all right, I see something more or less like what I entered. But even things like the doc type, it capitalized the letters. That's not how I wrote it. It's because it's re-inferring. It parsed it, and now it's deparsing it, stringifying it back into the HTML. But I got this paragraph tag here. Now, if I take that closing tag off like that, that's not valid HTML anymore. But that don't mean it. Browser isn't out there trying to help me out by throwing it in there for me. Also, as we use the DOM to add elements, add DOM nodes, remove DOM nodes, those kinds of things, that gets reflected here, even though that wasn't in the HTML that we wrote. What other questions do you have about what
Do you
the
have to
DOM
run?
is?
Do you have to run light server every time you change your .html file?
No, it'll refresh, but I'd have to run it in 2 tabs. So I do the server here, and if I go over, come on. So I can run light server over here, and it'll run that live. And now in my other tab, so if I do fucking Chrome, Chrome is the worst. Oop. right. Am I back? I think I'm back. Nope. Still a little laggy. All right. Feel like I'm all right now. So if I do something like that, come on now. And that. There we go. So now I can change this in real time without reloading the server, and it should update for me. You just have to run it in 2 tabs. Other questions about what the DOM is?
I'd be interested in hearing what everybody had to say, what they thought it was at the very beginning. When you first started the lecture, you had a Slack you.
Yeah. So here, I'll share 2 that I really liked. Come on. God, Chrome is like the most power-hungry, shitty JavaScript engine. All right, let me try reloading Slack. Force quit it.
Do the Chrome developers just don't care how much of your resources they use? Because I noticed on a couple things, it just blows up my computer.
Yep. Well, like, I don't know, Valley people be writing for Valley people. So they always assume like killer internet connections and top of the line machines. All right, I like this one. The DOM is the document object model. This is essentially the structure of a website represented as an object. It comprises everything you see when you go to a website. We can interact with and manipulate the DOM using JavaScript. Killer answer. Then I also liked, the DOM is a tree-like representation of the content of a web page, where each object on the page is a node, and every time we nest another tag inside the node, a new branch is created for that node. This allows you to change the page using JavaScript. Also a very good answer. Ask me some more questions about what the DOM is.
Inception. The DOM is Inception.
A little bit. So let's see like some examples of how we can create stuff with the DOM. So let's see. Chrome is your RAM now. Very good. Okay, so let's actually kill off all that. Just do this in Firefox. All right, so I've got this page here. Cool, auto reloads. Now, I'm gonna throw a JavaScript file in here called app.js. So I've got these 2 files in this folder. Okay, so now that page is linked up and I can prove it right there. All right, so my JavaScript is wired up. Let's say I wanted to make some p tag like so. I want to give that p tag the text content of Um, okay, so I've made this element. How come it's not on the page right now?
You haven't appended it to anything?
I haven't appended it to anything. It just exists in memory somewhere. So I got to figure out where in this tree do I want to add it. I can add it to the body, but I need to get the body. So I might say something like document.querySelector body. All right, well, now I have a reference to that body node. I already have one paragraph tag on there. So if I want another paragraph tag to come after it, I might say body.append p. If I do that, hey, there's my p tag. If I wanted it to be before the existing p tag, I can also do that. That's called a prepend. And now they're switched. I made an element, I got another element, and I added the first element to the second one. So to start with, I had some p tag hanging out in nowhere land. That was line 1, just creating a p tag. Setting its text content, that's technically a node also. So I have my string there, still hanging out in nowhere land. And then I got a little pointer to the body. And then I called append, which zoop, attaches it to that tree. Every time the DOM tree changes, the page re-renders. Pretty cool. More questions about what the DOM is?
Kind of related. Why did you choose to put a money symbol in front of your variables?
Ah, thank you for asking. So this is, the dollar sign isn't magical. It doesn't do anything. It's just a character. It could be nothing. It could be an underscore. It could be whatever. But the developers of my generation got in the habit of doing this with jQuery. And what I think is handy about it is I put dollar signs in front of things that are elements. It's just a little hint to myself that what I'm dealing with there is a DOM node, not a string, not a Boolean, not just a regular object. It's just a little hint to myself. Like, it's becoming less common. You don't have to do it, but I think it helps. It's especially helpful when, like, let's say you're doing the pair exercise from this morning and you get back a dog from the API. So a dog might be this, whereas a dog might be something like that. And then I'm saying dog dot text content equals maybe something like dog dot name. So dog is the object, dollar sign dog is the element that I'm representing it with. I think it's a handy convention. Other questions? Cool. So if I can make elements and add them to the page, then certainly I can do stuff like change stuff that's already on the page. So let's say over in this thing here, I give it a class. Give it a class just so I can have something to grab onto. I got 2 paragraph tags in the DOM right now. So if I try to target it by the tag name, I'm going to get both of them back. I want the first one. All right, greeting. So I could say greeting is document.querySelector.greeting. Exact same syntax we use in CSS to target things. And I could say greeting.textContent is not, it's this now. And hey, nah, it's this now. JavaScript is just was originally designed to be a tool to fuck with what's on the page after we've already loaded it. 2001 rolls around and the bonkers people over at Google said, huh, if we can dynamically add stuff to the page and dynamically rip stuff out of the page, we could really make a web page feel a lot more like an app. And so they created Gmail as a proof of concept of this. If you used email before, like the Gmail era, if you used old Yahoo Mail or old Hotmail or something like that, it used to be all of those were like different pages. You would click on a link to an email and the entire page would reload and your email would show up. It's like just a regular old HTML and CSS page. Gmail, you notice when you click a message there, it doesn't reload the page. It just, some stuff disappears and your message appears and all that kind of stuff. What it's doing is it's yanking stuff out of the DOM and putting stuff into the DOM. And now we have web apps. This is the thing you're studying in this program, is all based on that idea. Ask me more questions.
So this is a little ahead of things, but React, it does like, doesn't it like make it so that things can change on the web page without having to refresh the browser? And what does that have to do with the DOM? I mean, how does React do the DOM differently from what we're doing here?
Great question. This like DOM manipulation that I'm doing here with just regular old JavaScript, that's making it so that we don't have to refresh the page, which is the same thing that React is doing too. React just provides some extra goodies around it. But one of those is that when you're working with React, you don't work with this DOM anymore, like our actual DOM. So we could think of this. All this is kind of walled off away from us. And React does all the DOM work for us. It takes stuff out of the DOM, it puts stuff in the DOM, it changes stuff in the DOM. Like the name React is, you're keeping track of variables and stuff in React, and when they change, it reacts by changing the DOM for you. And then what you work with is what's called a virtual DOM. So you work with a fake DOM. React sees what you did with your fake DOM and then works with the real DOM. The reason why is probably not useful to talk about today, but a thing worth knowing now is that the DOM is slow as hell, is the slowest part of any web app. And so you want to change it as little as possible. That's what React is doing. It's allowing you to get wild and crazy and change your virtual DOM as fast as you want to. And then React schedules the actual DOM updates in a way that makes it feel fast. If none of that made any sense to you, don't worry about it. We're going to talk about it again in Mod 4 anyway. Other questions about the DOM?
What elements of like DOM manipulation should we feel comfortable with by the end of Mod 2?
Great question. The things that you need to be able to do in Mod 2 are you need to be able to add stuff to the DOM, you need to be able to remove stuff from the DOM, you need to be able to change stuff that's already in the DOM. You can do all of those things, you're in pretty good shape for like Mod 2 DOM stuff. You don't need to be able to do anything with events. That's like, I told you that we go mile wide, inch deep in Mod 2, and then we start bringing some of that depth in Mod 3. The event stuff, you might do some of it in your Mod 2 project, but events are really, we try to like split that out because it's one of the more interesting things I think you can do with the DOM, but it's also a brain exploder. So we do that right up front in Mod 3. Really, if you can do those things, which create, read, update, delete, it's kind of like what we were doing with our APIs. If you can do those things with the DOM, the only other things you're going to need to be comfortable with for Mod 2 are forms and fetches. Fetches we're talking about today. Forms, they're not complicated, especially how we're doing them in Mod 2. And we'll probably talk about that Wednesday. Can you read stuff out of the DOM? Can you write to the DOM? Can you update the DOM? Can you delete stuff from the DOM? That's it.
How much should we be worrying about CSS right now?
So CSS is not a part of the official Flatiron curriculum, believe it or fucking not. It's not on the code challenge. You can technically graduate without doing any CSS. Probably a lot harder to get a job because like, I don't know why the powers that be think this is so unimportant, but it's not. But you can graduate being pretty poor at CSS. But I hope that you'll find it valuable, and so we offer lots of content on it. But priority-wise, it's probably pretty low for you.
Okay, that really strikes me as bizarre because watching the Mod 5 projects, I mean, everybody
Yeah.
had a pretty good grip on it because, I mean, there's some amazing looking things.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So there's two things there. One, like a lot of those people take me seriously and like invest some like continuous time in CSS. It's heady. It's going to take you a while. So just a little bit at a time will go a long way. Second, there's also styling frameworks that will like help you with some of this. If you don't have some chops with the underlying CSS, you'll probably still code yourself into corners and make div soup and stuff. But yeah, there's on other campuses, there's some black and white shitty looking crapstones.
holy
Don't
shit.
do that. Like, I mean, put yourself in the shoes of a hiring manager. You see two capstones. Both of them are pretty good. One of them is black and white and uses Times New Roman. The other one like looks competent. Just saying, give yourself every advantage you can.
Sure.
And also CSS is not like, that's what the designers do. It's funny that designers think like, my job is to use Sketch and Photoshop and Illustrator and like make these pictures, and then the devs make it look like that with CSS. And so nobody thinks CSS is their job. And the reality is that like as a front end developer, it's part of the front end. It's also not, CSS is not design, it's implementing a design. And also design's kind of your job too. It's all about solving problems, and the visual interface that somebody uses to use a tool, that's part of solving their problem. That's your job too. Please don't be one of these whiny fucking devs. Yeah, my job. I do the math part. I do the logic. I don't do the looks. Design follows very similar logic to programming. It really does. It's not art. It's a lot. It's creative, but it's creative in the same way that programming is. You can learn it. All right. What else do you want to know about the DOM?
Do all browsers work with it the same?
Oh, that is a very insightful question. No. Well, more today than yesterday, but the part of a browser that works with the DOM is called its JavaScript engine. And most browsers, like there's 3-ish super common ones. So the one that Firefox uses and the one that Chrome uses are different. The one that Safari uses is different. Internet Explorer had its own, it was terrible. Edge had its own that was actually quite good, but nobody used it because nobody trusted Microsoft to make browsers anymore. And it doesn't matter because Microsoft discontinued their engine. They still have their browser, Edge is still going to exist, but they're no longer making their own JavaScript engine. They're just using Chrome's. And that's kind of the JS browser engine landscape at this point. The Chrome one, the Firefox one, the Safari one, and that's kind of it. Once upon a time, there were many, many more, but like Brave, for example, Brave isn't, they don't have their own JavaScript engine. It's a different browser. They have that concept of like bot, where you can like donate to content creators and a whole bunch of other things like that. That's part of the Brave browser, but they don't also manage their own JavaScript engine. They just use Mozilla's. Because all of those engines, by the way, except Safari's, are open source. So anybody can work on those and add features and stuff. Now, there's a reference spec that the standards body makes and goes, all right, this is what anybody who's trying to implement a JavaScript engine, you should be able to do these things. And so they're all trying to do the same thing, but like the pure truth of it is that they don't do it the same way. And they're, when you hear about cross-browser issues, that's kind of what they're talking about. Really interesting example of this. There's something that got taken out of the spec, a couple things that got taken out of the spec. That's what the standards body agreed on. Like, all right, we're not doing this anymore. And so everybody stopped doing it except Google, who made it like a really core part of how Gmail works. And so if you've ever noticed that Gmail is like significantly, and actually a lot of Google properties are significantly slower on Firefox and Safari, that's not because Chrome is like such a faster browser engine. It's not. It's because Chrome is Gmail is relying on some broken ass shit that Chrome still uses that everybody else dropped. And everyone else is like, what the fuck, Google? We all agreed we were going to get rid of that. Google's cool. Come over here and make us.
Good luck. We're bigger than all of you anyway.
Exactly. Which is like, I don't know if, I mean, this was in like the regular news a few months ago when it happened, when Microsoft stopped making their own browser engine and switched over to Google's. Like, there was a lot of hand-wringing about that. I think rightfully so. It was like, okay, that was the last thing that Google needed, was more control over the browser engine market. And the one from Mozilla is better anyway. So why the fuck didn't Microsoft just throw their hat in with that? Also a nonprofit. I don't know, confusing. I was also fairly disappointed with that decision.
I had a question about like manipulating the DOM with inner HTML versus the messing with the nodes. What's at stake in that decision? Because I see it both ways.
What's it?
And I don't understand.
I like that. So I would think of it like this. If I'm setting the text content, I can set the text to any string I want, right? What I can't do is do something like make that itself more HTML. It just comes out like that. If I make that inner HTML, now it interprets that as HTML. If all you know for like changing the content of something is inner HTML and text content, you're fine. It's also worth noting that you don't have to, if we do inner HTML, we have the same thing that we did before. Semantically though, if we're changing the text of something, that's its text content. If we're trying to add HTML to it, inner HTML is probably the right way to do that. And that really comes in handy when we do something like, all right, I got all my dogs back from the API. Come on. So I want to make something like this, where I take in, I do string interpolation to take the dog's name and the dog's age. I want to make this little like mini tree structure all in one go and then add it into the DOM. Inner HTML is a great tool for that, especially when you combine it with this string interpolation. That's pretty powerful. That's new too. We couldn't do that like 3 years ago.
Can you still do string interpolation with just text content?
No. Oh, sorry. You can do string interpolation with text content. You can't also make elements though. But you could totally do text content is person dot first name, person dot last name. Yeah, you can do stuff like that.
What's the difference between text content and inner text?
Inner text is don't use it.
Don't use it? Okay.
Text content is the more semantically correct one. They do the same thing in 99% of cases, but text content is the more accurate one. Inner text, you could do if you had a text node and you wanted to keep the existing text and then also add stuff to it. We're not doing that. We're just setting text content. What else? Cool. Practice time. So what I want to do, let's blow all that out. I want you to make an index.html file and an app.js file. we can, let's see, I'll make a little container here. We can copy this code. I'll throw it in chat so you can use it there if you'd like. React does some dumbbell curls. Scott, you win the week. So if you want to use that as starter code, you can. And then in your app.js file, I would like you to do the following. I'd like you to get the container. I want you to create a paragraph tag. I would like you to set its text to your name, and I want you to add it to the container. Questions about that? Go, go, gadget, go. Take a couple minutes for this. Cool. So let's see if we can figure this one out. I'm going to call on some people. We'll see if we can work through this together. Carlos, what code should I write for step 1 here to get the container? Oop, maybe Carlos stepped away. Will, pick it up.
All right, so you do container equals document dot query selector or dot container. Yeah. Or no, sorry. Yeah, delete the dot in front of that. But query selector at the end. Yeah. And then do quotes dot container.
Beautiful. Okay. Ooh, this would be right in Ruby, but in JavaScript.
Oh,
we
I'm
have
sorry.
to do-
Yeah, you have to do a constant.
Yeah. So this goes for everybody. You were going to make that mistake about 1,000 more times. We don't scope variables in Ruby. We do scope them in JavaScript. So we got to have the scope modifier. Cool. Very nice. Thank you. Andrew, how do I create a paragraph tag?
Hey, sorry, I'm having some computer issues. I haven't been 100% paying attention. I'm talking with my mate to work it out right now.
Okay, cool. Scott, pick it up. How do I create a paragraph tag?
You need to do like a caret P or a
Caret P?
sorry, a side, whatever you call the
Dollar sign?
that works.
Okay. Beautiful. What else?
And then I'm not sure.
All right, so I'm trying to make a DOM element. Documents the first part.
Dot create,
Dot create.
and then parentheses quotes P.
Good. One more thing we got to do. What are we creating?
Creating a
Element.
Yeah, let's create element. Document.query selector and document.create element, those two alone will take you a really long way. Very nice. Austin Evans, what am I doing to set this paragraph's text to my name?
P dot text content
Good.
equals quotes your name.
It is so. Very nice. Haley, how do I add it to the container?
So we'll do container dot append child and $P.
You're beautiful. There we go. I would caution you that, if you're going to do the dollar sign convention, do it everywhere. If you're not going to do it, don't do it anywhere. Don't care which one it is, as long as it's consistent. And then, so let's talk about append versus append child. They are really darn similar. Anybody know what the difference is in that and that?
How many things you can append?
How many things you can append. With append, I can do an arbitrary number of elements. Append child, I can only do one. Otherwise, they do the same thing.
And if you're
I tend to
doing,
prefer, go ahead.
If you're doing more than one with append, does it append them in the order you pass them in?
Yeah. I tend to prefer append, but like I said, they do the same thing. What else?
What if
What
you
question?
did?
Go ahead.
What if you did const p gets container dot create element p?
Ooh, interesting. I'll bet it still works.
Like, would it make it directly into the container?
Nope, broke. So creating elements is a thing that the document is allowed to do. You can think of it as like a little machine that cranks out new elements for us. Instances of elements don't have create element. Now, funny thing though, instances of elements do have query selector. So if I wanted to get every strong tag that was inside of this paragraph element, I can get that paragraph element and then do p.querySelector. And now I'm only looking in that part of the tree. That can be real nice. Yeah, creating elements, you're always going to do that one off document. The other way you could have done this is, I think, is kind of what you were getting at. That works too. There are lots of things that don't make sense to do with inner HTML like this. This one might be one of them. But you should be very fluent with both ways of doing that. Cool. Questions?
I remember Jesse saying that JS functions need explicit returns.
Correct.
So how does that work?
So we haven't used any functions here. In React, or sorry, in fucking Ruby, everything is in a class and everything is in a method, whether you say so or not. That's actually not the case in JavaScript. We can just write regular code that's out in the middle of nowhere. But let's say we wanted to have a function called like get name element. And it takes in a name as an argument, and it will create an element, set its text content to whatever name you pass in, and then returns it. So what we can do now is we can make Kyle is get name element Kyle. Now Elise is get name element Elise. So I have these two elements now. Come on, come on. That I used that function with. It's explicitly returning the element that I created with that little text node hanging off of it. And now I can append Kyle and Elise. And there we are. You want to see something really cool? If I make a function called add to container, and it takes in an element and container appends the element. Okay, okay. I got those two functions there. What I could say is I could make const people and make Kyle and Elise an array. And now I can do $ people is people.map and then pass each, oh, actually, I want to do this slightly differently. So I have these two strings here. I want to map through those strings and turn each one of them into the get name element, like that. So that gives me an array of elements. And now I can do people.forEach add to container person. Oh, baby, now we're programming. So if you want to see, like,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, if you want, like, this is how we use all of these skills we've been developing over the last 5 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever, kind of at the same time. And if you want to see something really wild, the pro version of that would look like this. Oh, we're not done yet. Does the same thing. That's some mod 3 shit. Don't worry about that. But like this code and this code are the exact same thing. But this is why I like JavaScript so much. All right, enough fucking around. Questions?
So fetch essentially feeds you that const people line.
Yeah, so like, let's say those are coming back from an API. As your preview for this afternoon. Fetch HTTPS my people list.com/API/people. All right, so I get all that back from the API. I take the JSON it gives me and parse it. And then that turns into like response.people, and then all the rest of it's the same. Now it's a full stack app.
So it has to be inside the then. That's what I screwed up. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll play with that more in the fetch lesson, but there's no equivalent to the thens in Ruby. That's a completely new idea for us, and yeah, they have to be inside of it. Other questions about the DOM? be well prepared for the code challenge, you should be able to do all the things that we did in this lesson in your sleep. So if you can't yet, that's what you should practice. And if there's one like academic takeaway I could have you walk away from this with, HTML, it's not even a string, it's just some characters. We turn it into the DOM, and then the HTML doesn't exist anymore. All we care about is the DOM. The HTML is instructions on how to build the DOM. And once we have a DOM, we can use JavaScript to read nodes out, change them, make new ones, get rid of stuff. And that's what full stack application development is all about, is just doing that at various different levels. Cool, thanks for playing, and I will see you guys this afternoon for Fetch. Bye. Have a good lunch.
Thank you, Kyle.
Yep, yep.